Hello, everyone. Today we have a special guest with us, Eric Hernandez, and our conversation will be on abortion. I'll be asking Eric questions related to this topic regarding morality, the soul, and if Christians should get involved politically. So thank you so much, Eric, for being here today.
And thank you for having me.
Can you tell us a little bit about yourself before we begin?
Yeah, sure. My name is Eric Hernandez, like you said. I am the apologetics lead for the Baptist General Convention of Texas, which encompasses everything from hosting 3 annual, what we call the unapologetic evangelism conferences, and just doing trainings and teachings with believers, whether it's on a church campus, a college campus, anything of those natures, just equipping them with how to evangelize and incorporating apologetics into their evangelism.
Nice. We've had Leighton Flowers on this channel before. Do you guys work together on that for Texas Baptist?
Yes, indeed. He's my boss.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've seen you on YouTube. Usually you're on debates, right?
Yeah. Yeah. I've been known to do a few of those.
So you have a YouTube channel. Is it Eric Hernandez?
Yeah, just Eric Hernandez. Yeah, you can just type my name in youtube.com/Eric Hernandez. Yeah.
Alrighty. So the first question that I would like us to talk about is which worldview, in your opinion, has better grounds to, first of all, answer questions related to abortion?
Yeah, so great question. I suppose it would depend what question it is, because maybe as a way of preliminary remarks, something to be said about abortion is ultimately that it's oversimplistically reduced to a pro-choice versus pro-life, and there's some even then there's some baggage to the language, but essentially there's 3 basic areas that a person can disagree with or disagree on when it comes to the question of abortion. So people can disagree about, let's say, the moral values of a situation. So, for example, the question could be, is the unborn a person, a human person, which goes a little bit deeper than just a human being. Person or personhood is a different question. And when it comes to that question, I think you would have to go at the very least beyond a physicalist view of human nature. That would mean that people are more than just something physical, and they are more than just something functional. So, if I were to lose certain functions, or rather, so for example, I have the functional ability to speak English and I can speak Spanish, but does that make me human? Does that function make me human? Is personhood something that can be defined in a functionalistic way? I don't think so, which would mean that losing a function does not mean I lose my personhood. So when it comes to answering the question of the unborn and the nature of personhood, you would have to, at the very least, go beyond a physicalist, naturalist perspective. And then I would say, on the other end of the spectrum, the best approach to this would have to be something like the Christian Judeo worldview, the Christian worldview. And I guess I'll just kind of break that. We can go a little bit deeper if you want there. Another area where people can disagree on is also on the nature of the facts of the situation, or the moral facts surrounding the situation. So in the first one, again, there's 3 areas ultimately that I would say you can break down the disagreement. The first is whether or not the unborn are human persons. So now we're talking about, let's say, values. And, one person may say yes, the other may say no, but the question ultimately comes, is the unborn a person? The second area would be something regarding, let's say, it could be a difference of moral facts or just the facts of the situation. So, for example, if you go to somewhere like India, they're not going to be eating hamburgers. They're not going to eat cows. And the reason is because in their minds, it's immoral to eat your ancestors. And according to their religion, a cow could be grandmother. So the reason they don't eat cows is because they think it is immoral to eat grandma. But note, I think it's immoral to eat your grandparents as well. So I'm not going to eat my grandparents. However, I disagree about the fact that this cow could possibly be grandma. So we agree on the moral value, but we disagree about the facts of the moral situation. So that'd be a second area of disagreement. But once again, I think the best way to answer these kind of things would have to be a worldview in which there is something more than the physical, and a worldview that would include metaphysics, metaphysical assumptions, and things like the essence or the nature of a cow or a person, things like that. And then the third would be a disagreement pertaining to the weight of each moral value. So, for example, to recap really quick, in the first case, two people can disagree about whether the unborn are persons. In the next case, we can disagree about the facts about the situation, whether or not it is moral or immoral to kill a person, and whether or not a cow is a person or not, or could be a reincarnate person. And then there could be a disagreement of moral values, the weight of the moral values. So in this last instance, we would basically agree on the first two. We would agree that the unborn are human persons, and we would agree that it's immoral to kill innocent unborn children. However, the disagreement would become, you have the quote rights of the unborn, but you also have the preference or the rights of the autonomy of the mother. And the disagreement would then become, one person says, well, I think the mother's right to choose what she does with her body supersedes the rights of the unborn human person, a child in her womb. So on that last one, we're not disagreeing about the first two, we're agreeing, but we're disagreeing which one of these takes precedence. And I think that there are instances when moral values may tend to conflict. And I think in these instances, you have to go with, quote, the weightier, heavier principle, if you will. We can get into that a little bit deeper if you want, because that I didn't explain that in depth. But that being said, I would say for each of those, the Christian worldview would be the one that would explain and give us the best answer for any of those three.
When you were talking about, personhood, more physical, functional, and you kind of talked a little bit about if the unborn is a person. So, like in that logic, would there be some kind of conflicting beliefs when it comes to like if what makes someone a person is that they're outside of the womb? And so,
Yeah, so great question. It would depend on a case by case. Each person may provide a different argument, but basically, in that first part, someone may say, they can say one of two things. Someone can say, well, the unborn are not human beings prior to X, Y, or Z. But I think people now, I think for the most part, people are willing to concede. And again, it's case by case, but for the most part, people are willing to concede that the unborn are human. But they would say, yeah, but sperm is also, quote, human. It has human DNA, or this or that is human, or things of that nature. But while I disagree with some of the examples they give, the next step would be they could also say, okay, the unborn is human, but it's not a person. And it's kind of the same line of thinking, except it just kind of pushes the goalpost in another direction. And here, each person may give a different reason, but so there's something called the SLED test, which you may be familiar with. And on my channel, I defended this or articulated it, and I presented it at college campuses before, where basically what you're alluding to is, if you're going to say that there is some significant difference that makes me a person and not the unborn child in the womb a person, then you're going to have to tell me what that difference is. But when you look at any answer that's going to be provided, it's not a difference that's going to be significant or substantial enough to make that difference of whether or not you can kill this unborn person. So the SLED test is an acronym, SLED. And it stands for size for the S, L, level of development, E is environment, which could be the location, and then D is the degree of dependency. Now, there may be others, but they're all essentially going to fall into that. But yes, someone's going to have to say, so here's a popular one. Someone might say, well, the unborn is not conscious up until X amount of weeks. What they're essentially saying is, this unborn child does not constitute as a human being until it has this particular function. But back to what I was saying, if personhood is not something that is defined by function, well, then it leads into a slippery slope. So if someone says, well, the unborn's not conscious up until X weeks, well, what happens when I become unconscious at 34 years old? Am I no longer a person? Well, I think it's everyone's going to say, yes, I'm still a person. If I'm in a coma, I'm still a person. Now, what's funny is I one time heard someone say, well, what if we knew the person was going to come out of the coma? And the other person responded and saying, okay, well, let's go with that. What if someone was in a person for, say 9 months? Would they still be persons? And of course, alluding to the unborn child being 9 months in the womb. Whether or not they're conscious is irrelevant. If they're persons from the beginning, which is a whole separate question, the point is whether or not I have these functions, because these functions can come and go, it follows that me being defined as a person must go much deeper than mere functionality.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So the questions that we were referring to are questions like, is abortion moral? And when does life begin? Those kind of questions. You're saying that a Christian worldview would best answer them.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then, like I said, you're dealing with something beyond the physical. Because let's, for the sake of argument, say there was no God. Let's say atheism was true. Let's take a naturalistic worldview.
Mhm.
You would have to define personhood by something physical or by something functional. But again, that leads into a slippery slope. As I'm sure you've seen some of my discussions, or for those who may not be familiar, on my YouTube channel, I have discussions and debates on the soul. And some of the arguments I give for the soul is to show that I am more than a body, or more than a brain and body. And to do that, I show that things like personhood cannot be defined by something physical or functional. Um, uh, to be brief, if you were to cut off my arms and legs, I would not be half a person. I would still be 100% a person, but it would make sense to say that I had half a body, which means if I can have half a body but still be 100% of a person, then it follows I am not defined nor reducible to my body. I must be something more than that, something like a soul. Again, I'm just giving the overview simplistic version. Same thing with my brain. If I had surgery where 50 of my brain was removed, 50% of my brain was removed, I wouldn't be 50% of a person. I would be 100% of a person with only 50% of a brain. So I would lose functioning, but I wouldn't lose personhood. Now, if there's nothing like a soul or God to grant these rights and values and to ground my identity as a person, well, then it would end up being the case that personhood must be measured by mass and matter. But as I always like to ask, does having more mass and matter mean that you matter more? No, of course not. Men are typically larger than women in terms of size and mass, but it doesn't mean that men are more valuable than women, or that men are more persons than women. It's kind of like gold. The more weight in gold you have, the more value you have. What does that apply to human beings? No. Why? Because we're not reducible to mass and matter. So if there's no God or no soul, you're going to ultimately have to place value on something physical like mass and matter. And again, that leads into a whole host of other problems. So right, yeah, as we were going back to saying, without Christianity, I don't see how you can answer the question other than to either appeal to something physical, which has its problems, or to just say, I mean, who cares? I like to eat at Taco Bell. You may like to eat at Burger King, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. You like to kill unborn children. This person likes to kill children that are born, but only before 2 years old. And some people think we shouldn't do either. Who really cares? So, yeah.
Yeah. What you're saying kind of reminds me of when a girl was born. They would usually just kind of discard those babies, and then the Christians would go and rescue them because the value of a female baby was viewed less back in those days.
Yeah, in different places around the world, of course, as far back as like the Spartans, they had. And here's what's interesting is because we see a parallel of this today. If babies were born that were defective, or with Down syndrome or some type of visible biological dysfunction, disease, or complications, they would throw the baby off a cliff because that baby wasn't regarded as valuable as a quote normal baby. I say that in quotes, of course. I have family that are mentally disabled or have Down syndrome and things of that nature. And and then in some areas it was because, well, we're too poor to afford a non-normal baby, or what, whatever excuse they would give, they would disregard the child after it was born. um, Fast forward to today, well, all we've been able to do is detect whether or not the child has a disability earlier than it being born, but it's still the same principle. And in some places, they want to pass laws, if they have not already, about being able to still kill the child after the child has been born. I know someone like Peter Singer has advocated for the ability to, and this is an atheist philosopher, Peter Singer, has advocated for having the ability to kill a child who is born up to 30 days after it is born. In other words, it's and which is bizarre to me. It's almost like buying a car or a house, or it's some kind of like an advertisement. 30-day guarantee, you can get your money back. If you don't want this baby, you've got 30 days to decide. Now, what's incredibly ironic is that Peter Singer's own mother, at the end of her life, had a disability where he basically came out and said, yeah, given what I've said in the past, I should pull the plug on her, but I just can't bring myself to do it. Because I think even he knows that there's something more than, just the physical. Absolutely.
Mm. It's not livable, like what
Yeah.
he's teaching. Okay, so according to the Christian worldview, when does life begin? Is it conception? Does it have to do with the baby's viability?
Yeah. So great question. And are you familiar with what's called the SLED test that I mentioned earlier?
No, this was the first time that I'm
Oh,
hearing.
okay. Okay, great. So let me kind of touch on both of those then. Um, and I'm just writing it down so I don't forget. So if I can answer the question you asked, if I can answer it a different way, typically the question that I get is, when does a soul enter the body? Is usually the question I get. Now, without going too deep into the metaphysics, there's two views on the origin of the soul for each person. There's what's called the creationist view, not to be confused with younger old earth creationism. It's just called the creationist view of the soul. And the other is known as the Traducian view of the soul. I would hold to the Traducian view, and let me oversimplify what each view holds to. On the creationist view of the soul, God looks down, and I'm again speaking figuratively here. God looks down and sees a fertilized egg, and tells the angel Gabriel or Peter, or whatever, and says, that bad boy looks good enough. Let's zap that one with the soul. And then when the right physical conditions are there, God creates a soul for each of these fertilized eggs. On the Traducian view, it's a bit different and more complicated. Not that the other one's not, but basically, God has set up the world in such a way that when everybody knows about the birds and the bees, when the mother and father come together, the sperm and egg has this soulish potential within its DNA that has the ability to reproduce from the substance that is there, a new substance that comes into existence. Again, without going too deep, you can think of it this way. From the very beginning in Genesis, when God set up the world, he basically set it up in such a way to where he can, quote, wind it up and take his hands off and allow it to keep going. Hence, the Bible says that God made X, Y, and Z, and then he created it in such a way that it would reproduce after its kind, which means, according to Genesis, God created the world in order for it to be self-sustaining, in the sense that it is able to reproduce. So if I plant an orange seed, I get an orange tree, which gives me oranges, which has orange seeds, and the process can keep going. I think the same applies to human beings. And if that's the case, then God wouldn't have to, quote, keep creating souls. And it kind of makes more sense when we look and see that from the seventh day on, he rested and ceased from creating. So that being said, on my view, the Traducian view, the soul is what's called, if I can use the big word here, the soul is ontologically prior to the body, which means the soul is the very thing that forms a body. And again, I'm trying to think how deep to go without going too deep. So the soul is an immaterial substance. Contrast that with a purely physical object, which we would call in philosophy, let's just say an aggregate. What is an aggregate? It is a collection of parts held together in a certain structure. So a car would be an aggregate. It is a purely physical object, Lego bricks. They're just pieces put together. Now, the difference between an aggregate like a car and a substance, an immaterial substance, which would be the soul, like a person, is the following. When it comes to aggregates like a car, the existence of the car as a whole depends on the existence and identity of its parts. Here's what I mean. If I took a tire off of a car, it still remains a tire, which means its existence doesn't depend on its connection to the car. It exists as a tire independent or even prior to the existence of a car. So for aggregates, the parts exist prior to the whole. Now contrast that with something like a substance. So I am a substance. As a soul, I am a substance. Animals, I would argue, have souls. My dog's a substance. And note the difference. I, as a substance, my soul is the substance that exists prior ontologically to the whole. How do we know that? Because if you chop my arm off, I don't cease to exist or cease to be a person, which means my existence as a whole person is not dependent on the parts of my body. In fact, it's actually the opposite. The body and my parts depend on me as a substance. So the parts depend on me. I don't depend on the parts. If you chop off my arm, it ceases to be a human hand and ceases to exist. How do I know that? Because when it's not connected to me, it will decay and cease to exist within a few days. Again, contrast that with an aggregate. You take a tire off a car, it's still a tire. It doesn't depend on the whole. You take my hand away from me, it ceases to exist because these parts depend on me as a whole. So that being said, if there is a body, and if the Traducian view of the soul is correct, then if there is a body, there must already be a soul there to begin with, because on my view, the soul is what comes ontologically prior to the body. So it's actually the body that depends on the soul. That's why when my soul leaves the body, all you have is a corpse and it begins to rot, because my soul is what gives my body life. So on my view, it would be, and I know you didn't ask it, the hypothetical question, when does the soul enter the body, on my view would be the wrong question to ask, because on my view, if there's a body, then there must already be a soul there to begin with. Now, if that's the case, then life is there from conception. Absolutely. Now, that's the metaphysical answer. Of course, you can give a more, on the other end of the spectrum, you can give a scientific answer, which I would think equally shows that from the beginning, you have human life, a new human life, a new DNA that is not mine or my wife's DNA. It's a completely new DNA. So I think both physically and metaphysically, we have evidence that from conception, you have a brand new life.
Yeah, I was going to bring up that the question about the soul. So just in case like there's someone listening that they kind of struggle even after hearing that with, so what exactly are you saying is our soul? Is that our heart? Is that our brain? Is that, what is that? Is that like, what is that, the soul?
Great question. So the definition, we could define the soul as an immaterial substance that possesses consciousness and animates the body. Here's the simplest way. When I say the word I, the self, when I say the word I is what's called an indexical word. It's kind of like the word here or there. When I say here, that doesn't really refer to anything unless you know what I'm referring to, or when I say there. So the word I is an indexical word. It references something. So what is the word I? What does the letter I refer to? It refers to me, the person. So here's a question. What am I? When I use the word I, if I say, I am happy, what is the I referring to? What's referring to me, the person, but what am I? In other words, if someone said, can you point to Eric? You could probably stand 10 feet away and point in this direction. But as you got closer, what would you point to? What particular part of my body, would you point to? Well, if at the end of the day, I'm basically going to say, well, I cannot be reduced to something. The word I can't be reduced to just the body, because again, some of the arguments I gave, removing my arms and legs doesn't make me have a person. So I does not equal body. It must equal something more. So what is a soul? It is me, the person. Suffice it to say, I don't have a soul. I am a soul. I have a body, but I am a soul. So we could say I am a soul that has a body, and a body without a soul is a dead corpse. And then it's here where I tell people that I've actually changed my position on this, because I actually do believe I have a soul, and it's an orange Kia Soul, and it's parked in my driveway, and I've had it for a couple of years already. And I bought that car just so I can make this joke. It's a very rich joke, if you will. It has a rich punchline. So I am not a soul. Excuse me. I don't have a soul. I am a soul. I have a body. So when you say, so you can think of the soul as just me, the self, the conscious subject that is a soul. Does that help?
Yeah, because like when you hear about the soul in the Bible, sometimes it's a little confusing because it almost seems like it kind of switches from heart to soul. So it's because I guess I've always not understood it. I've always thought of soul as like my passion, my feelings. But is that part of us? Like,
So good question. And it can get confused because there's a lot of, so the language that's being used and the idioms that are being used can also be confusing. But here's why: it's just because of the way they spoke. But of course, you can only understand if I say it's raining cats and dogs. People don't think that there are little cats and dogs falling from the sky, right? They know that I mean, it's raining hard. But when you understand the language, or maybe even the reason behind it, that term came from, there's a few theories on where the term came from, but ultimately, um, whenever, so cats and dogs used to they like to sit on cushion. And whenever this term was invented, this phrase was invented, cats and dogs, if they can climb on top of a house that was made of straw, they would sit on top of the houses, as kind of like to use for a bed. But when it would rain, it would kind of mess with the straw of the roof, and the cats and dogs would fall through the roof because it was wet. So when people said it's raining cats and dogs, it was a way to say it's raining so hard. But that came from the idea that when it rained hard, you would see cats and dogs falling through the roof because it would mess up the straw that were sitting on the roof. So again, so that would be an idiom that we use now, but when you understand where it came from, it helps us understand what the person's saying. So back then, they would have understood the soul to be the person. Now, with that in mind, if I said, hey guys, we're going to work at 12 o'clock after lunch, and I want all hands on deck. Now, I don't think anybody there is going to say, gotcha. And at 12 o'clock, they're going to chop their hands off and throw it onto the deck. Of course, I don't just want their hands, I want their whole body, but I'm saying all hands on deck as a phrase or an idiom to reference, to emphasize something in particular that I want. So hands would represent their labor. So when I say all hands on deck, I'm saying I want everybody's whole body there, but I'm saying hands to indicate I want you there because I need work. I need a hand. I need labor. So that would be a part to whole relationship. I forget the technical word for that, but basically I'm emphasizing a part of something. Even though I'm talking about the whole, I'm emphasizing the part in order to convey an idea that I'm trying to get at, namely labor. So hands mean work. So I want everybody to work. In the same way, when the person is talking about the passion, or talking about the soul as passion, again, he's doing the same thing. It's a part to whole relationship. I am a soul. I am a soul, and within my soul, I have passions. I have a mentality. I have desires. I have beliefs. I have thoughts. But if I were talking, I could perhaps emphasize a particular aspect of my soul in order to make a point. So if I say, my heart is growing weary, even today, if you were to say that, no one thinks that your heart is actually, it's your heart that's sad, but as a person, you're happy. You're emphasizing your emotions or your passions. That the same thing would be happening when it talks about the soul. So without going too much deeper than that, yeah, it can be confusing, but when you understand the context and look at what's being emphasized, it's usually the context will tell you why it is they're saying that particular thing or what they're trying to get at, the point across in those passages.
people that might not want to believe that there is a soul, they might think that what
They might
makes
not have a soul. That's why.
They might think something like that. What makes us people is actually our brain, right? Because if, like you said, maybe you chop off an arm, but you're still a person. But like, what about like the organs that you couldn't live without? Is that what makes someone a person? Because
Yeah, so good question. So that would basically be going back to, again, functionality. The person is going to have to point to a certain function and say this function depends on this organ. They're basically pointing to a function and saying, like I said, this organ is needed for this function. But if they're going to go the organ route, so for example, let's say someone says, well, you can't live without a heart. Well, sure, but at least not physically, but I could replace my heart with someone else's heart.
mm,
Does that make me a different person? No. So again, it must follow then, therefore, I am not necessary or dependent on this particular heart. So again, I am more than Legos, if you will. I am more than just parts. I'm something more than that. Nevertheless, I would be talking about, then they'll have to go to the function. But then again, there's a whole intricacy to the function because, well, if you're going to say you need the function of a heart, sure, but wait a minute, doesn't the heart need the function of oxygen, which is dependent on the function of lungs? So am I lungs and a heart? You know what? You can see where the slippery slope gets into. And basically, at the end of the day, I would argue we cannot be reducible to just function or parts. We have to be something more than that. Otherwise, here's an argument I haven't used yet. When I argue for the existence of the soul, one of these, my arguments that I use is called, not my arguments, philosophers came up with it, but one of the arguments within my toolkit, if you will, that I use is an argument from identity through change. And what this means is basically that if I'm just a purely physical object and there is no soul, because there's really two options for the sake of our purpose here, there's two options. You're either a soul with a body, or you're just a purely physical body and there's nothing immaterial like a soul to you. Here's a problem. If you're just a physical body, then you're an aggregate. But aggregates don't maintain what's called identity through change. Here's the easiest way to illustrate that. Take a tricycle. Tricycle has 3 wheels. Metaphysically speaking, if I were to remove a wheel from a tricycle, then we could say that a tricycle ceased to exist and a bicycle came into existence because now it only has 2 wheels. One more thought experiment. Take a car. If I were to replace the tires of a car, we can ask ourselves, is this the same car? Now, if regardless of the answer, let's push the analogy further. If anyone's seen the show WandaVision from Marvel, you know that one of the last episodes, the 2 visions talking to each other, spoiler alert, they talk about what's called the ship of Theseus. Have you watched that show by chance? No, it's okay. You're more saved than I am. Trust me. But anyway, so in the show, they it's interesting because they actually talk about a very popular philosophical thought experiment, the ship of Theseus, where basically it's kind of the same thing with the car analogy. So you have this car, change the tires. Is it the same car? Well, let's keep going. What if we change every single piece of the car? Every nut, bolt, window, windshield, every single piece of it. Then we can ask ourselves, is this the same car? But one more thing to push further. What if we took all the replaced parts and put those back together? Now we can ask the question, which one of these 2 is the original? Regardless of your answer, it's clear that they both can't be the original if either of them are, which shows us, I think, very clearly that purely physical objects do not maintain identity through change. Now, now we can ask ourselves, okay, I am either a purely physical object or I'm a soul, an immaterial substance. Well, if I'm just a brain and body, a physical object, we know scientifically speaking that every 7 to 10 years, your body replaces almost every cell that you have. So here's the thing. Suppose I committed a crime 7 to 10 years ago, and the police show up to my door and say, Eric, we found evidence that 7 to 10 years ago, you committed a murder. And I said, officer, wait a minute, time out. Don't you know we're just physical bodies? And don't you know that whoever committed that crime 7 to 10 years ago doesn't exist anymore because it's not me. I have a whole different set of body. Obviously, they're gonna look at me funny and take me to jail. So I think we all know that I do maintain identity through change and part replacement. And if I do maintain identity through part replacement, and if purely physical objects do not maintain identity through change or part replacement, then it follows I'm more than a physical body. I must be something like a soul. Does that make sense?
Yes. And I'll hear it again and it'll make more sense later on. But I think I get the idea of what you're saying. We talked about baby's viability already, right? So does
Oh,
the
that's yeah,
have
actually. So the SLED test, right? I forgot to mention that. Yes,
okay.
okay. So on my channel, I think it's called The Absurdity of Pro-Choice, and it's like a 5 to 7 minute video where I kind of do the highlights of the SLED test from a talk I gave at the University of Texas, I think in Dallas. But basically, here's a SLED. So when I go to, even whether it's a church or college campus and I talk about abortion, there's two things I focus on. One is what's called the SLED test, and the other is a response tool known as trotting out the toddler. So basically, any argument that you give me in favor of abortion, I'm going to pass it through the SLED test. Again, SLED, SLED. And because basically, and I forget who was the one that came up with this, but they basically said any argument for abortion, for the most part, is going to choose one particular difference. And this would be, let's say, what's the difference between an unborn child and a 2-month-old child? Whatever that difference is, that's going to be an argument used for abortion. But whatever the argument, it's going to fall under one of these four categories of the SLED test: either the size of the child, the unborn child, the level of development, the environment of the unborn child, or the degree of dependency. So let's go through each one really quick. So size. Obviously, a 2-week-old baby is smaller in size than a 2-month-old baby. But does that justify killing the 2-month-old, the 2-week-old baby and not the 2-month-old baby? No, of course not. Why? Because size doesn't change what you are. It isn't, again, the mass and matter, value doesn't make a difference. And in the talk, I basically say, okay, here's an unborn child. We can kill this one. 2 months old, we can't kill that one. 12 years old, still can't kill that one. But if you keep going, then the biggest one, let's say the adult woman, well, all of a sudden now she has the power to kill the first one, the unborn. How does that make any sense? L, level of development. We can use the same chart, if you will. 2-month-old baby is not as developed as a 2-month-old baby in the womb, unborn, is not as developed as a 2-month-old baby outside the womb. But does that justify killing one over the other? Because a 2-year-old baby is more developed than a 2-month-old baby. But again, we don't give them different value. They may have different functions, but not different value. And again, you can just keep going up. And again, it's not until you get to the final level, if you will, that now you can kill the one in the womb. What about, and here's another thing too. There have been cases in Texas where, because if I'm not mistaken, in Texas, you can kill, and that's what it is. You are taking a life, and you're killing an unborn child. You can kill an unborn child up until, I want to say 22 weeks. It may have changed. I can't remember, or 24 weeks. But let's just say 22 weeks, for the sake of argument. You can kill an unborn child up to 22 weeks old, in the womb, up to 22 weeks pregnant. Now, imagine this scenario, which to my knowledge hasn't happened, but in principle it has. Suppose there's a hospital room with 2 beds. On the right side, you have a woman who just gave birth to a premature 22-week-old baby, and this has happened. And on the other side of the room, you have a woman that is 22 weeks old, pregnant. The doctor walks into the room. If he kills the baby on this side, the premature one, he goes to jail for manslaughter. If he kills the baby on the other side, in the womb, he gets paid for doing his job. The children are at the same level of development. They're typically the same size, and the woman was the same amount of weeks pregnant. What's the difference? One's inside the womb and one's out. That goes into the next category, environment. the E in the SLED test, environment. Does being in the womb, does it give you more, or being outside of the womb, does it give you more value? No. Does it change your nature? No. Does it change you as a person? No. Does it change what you are? No. You have the same amount of value inside of the womb and outside the womb, which means environment is not a criteria that should be justifiable for abortion. In fact, at one college that I spoke at, I said something like, let's say it took me 70 miles to get here, which means I traveled from A to point B, and it was in 70 miles. And I asked the students, did traveling 70 miles change my nature or who I was as a person? They said no. I said, okay, well, if driving 70 miles doesn't change my nature, then I showed, a clip art of a woman pregnant. And I said, well, then how does how does traveling 7 inches down a vaginal canal change you from unvaluable non-person to valuable person? Just doesn't make any sense. So environment where the baby is located is not a criteria for abortion. The last one is degree of dependency. And this one's very odd too, because it basically says, well, you can kill an unborn child up until this degree of dependency, or what you said, viability. Now, what is viability? It's always good to define your terms when you're in any of these kinds of discussions. Viability is essentially, at what point can the baby survive outside of the womb? But even that's kind of vague. What do you mean by outside of the womb? One lady told me, well, whenever at the point that the baby can be outside the womb and survive on its own without the mother. I said, show me any baby that can do that. Unless you're a boss baby, I don't know of any baby that can survive. I mean, it's not like the baby comes out of the womb, goes and gets a job at McDonald's, and then doesn't need mom anymore. Even after that, the baby still depends on the mother, still depends on the mother's body, especially if you're breastfeeding. So it's not as if when the baby pops out, the mother's like, all right, deuce, see you and, see you later. Call me when you graduate or anything like that. We're not like sharks, whereas as soon as the babies come out, the mother and babies swim away, usually because the mother tries to eat the baby. The baby still depends on the mother. I know you have children. Is when you gave birth, you didn't just stop being a mother. You didn't just stop, using your body to raise them. I'm sure today you still use your body. My wife still uses her body. I use my body, losing sleep and time and all this other stuff. So it's not as if this degree of dependency, it's first of all, it has nothing to do with the nature of the child, whether the child's a person or not, a human being or not. Second, if we really think about it and look at it, degree or viability is really a measure of our technology. It's not a measure of value of the unborn child. Why? I think in America, the around the world really, but it happened in America, if I'm not mistaken, the youngest premature baby to ever be born was a woman who was 22 weeks old pregnant and survived. So we could say in America, the viability would be, let's say, 22 weeks. But if we go back 50 years ago, it wasn't 22 weeks. It was later than that. What changed? Did the baby change? No. Did the value of the baby? No. What changed? Our technology. That's the only thing that changed. In fact, if you go to like the East, the age of viability is about 28 weeks. Why? Because their technology is not as good as ours. So are you telling me that in America, a baby is a person at 22 weeks, but if you go to Bangladesh, a baby is a person at 28 weeks? Again, doesn't make sense. Why? Because it's not a measure of our value. It's a measure of our technology. So that's the SLED test. And again, I just went through it quickly. Notice that SLED, none of these categories are sufficient to justify abortion. And here's where trotting out the toddler comes into play. What is trotting out the toddler? When people give me an argument for abortion, they'll say, well, I believe a woman should be able to have an abortion because of X, Y, or Z. Again, it's going to usually fall into the SLED test. So what I do is I trot out the toddler. I bring out this imaginary toddler and I say, let's take this 2-month-old baby. Can I use the argument that you just gave to kill this 2-month-old baby? And 9 times out of 10, they're going to say no. And I say, okay, then it shouldn't apply to the baby inside the womb. Why? Because really the question becomes this, and I believe it was Greg Kokel who said this. He said, if the unborn are not human beings, are not human persons, then have as many of you as you like. Who cares? It would be like clipping your toenails or cutting your hair. I don't care how many times you clip your toenails. Why? Because your toenails aren't persons, so it doesn't matter to me. But if the unborn are human, so he says, let me rewind. So if he says, if the unborn are not human persons, then no justification is necessary. You don't need to justify. I don't need to justify how often I cut my hair or how often I cut my nails. But if the unborn are human persons, then no justification could ever be given. So when people say, well, we need to make abortion illegal so it can be safe and rare, my question is always why? If the unborn aren't human beings, why rare? Who cares how many there are? But if you're saying we should make it rare, why? Well, because it's such a moral dilemma. What makes it a moral dilemma? Again, I don't have a moral dilemma when I go to the barbershop or when I cut my toenails. So if you have a moral dilemma with abortion, why? If it's a moral dilemma because it's an unborn human person, then why in the world are we doing this? And if they're not human persons, then why are we arguing about it? What does it matter? So I think it's much deeper than people try to make it superficially. So try not to toddler. So here's, let's take some of the main examples, and then at any time, please cut me off. Let's say someone says, well, I believe a woman should be able to have an abortion if she was raped. Let's say it was a product of incest. Okay, so what's the justification? Well, essentially, this woman shouldn't be forced, is usually the rhetoric, to have this baby because it's a product of rape. Okay, if that's the justification, let's trot out the toddler. Bring out the 2-month-old baby. This 2-month-old baby was a product of rape. Let's pretend there was a woman who, let's just say she wanted to have an abortion, but last minute said, no, I can't do it. I shouldn't punish this baby. But then guess what? She has the baby, and as soon as she sees that baby's face, she thinks of her rapist. Can she kill this baby? If the answer is no, well, apparently it doesn't matter whether or not the baby was a product of rape. She can't kill it. Now, someone might say, yeah, but the baby's already been born. Well, what does that matter? If your argument is it's a product of rape, then it shouldn't matter in the womb or outside the womb. So we can throw that one out. Another one is, let's say, what if the woman's poor? Again, if you have a baby, once the baby's born, let's bring out the 2-month-old baby. Can I kill this 2-month-old baby if I'm poor? No. Well, then why does it matter? The other one is a disability, Down syndrome, things like that. So here's what I've done in the past. I say, let's just take all the popular ones and put it into one scenario. Let's say, hypothetically, God forbid, knock on wood, whatever you want to do the cross on your face. Let's say, God forbid, that I get a call and they fire me from my job. And let's say, God forbid, on my way home, let's say my wife got into some accident and everybody was left with a disability and disfigured. And let's say when I go to the hospital, they survive, but they're in bad condition. And then my wife says, hey, I never wanted to say this, but I feel like I need to tell you, both of our kids, they're products of rape. They're not your children. So what's the situation? I'm broke. I don't have a job. My children are disfigured and disabled. And I just found out they're the product of rape. Can my wife kill them? If the answer is no, then it does not and should not apply while inside the womb. So if, like, SLED test, 4 categories, try not to toddler. Let's apply this argument to a 2-month-old baby. If it doesn't work here, well, then why should it work for abortion? And they're being inconsistent. One last thing I'll say, someone said, well, what do we do with all the foster kids? There's many ways to answer that, but here's what I like to do is call their bluff. That's really not the issue. Because I said, what if I told you that tomorrow I could adopt every foster kid in the world? Would you then help me ban abortion? They say no. I say, okay, then it's not about foster kids, obviously. So why bring it up? Well, what about this, that, or the other? Let's fix that. Or they say, what about women who, again, they'll go to the rape. What about the women who got raped? What if I did a compromise? What if I said, okay, we can ban all abortions except for rape? Are you on board? They're going to say no. Why? Because it's not the issue. So I mean, there's plenty of ways to call a bluff, but SLED test, SLED, and try not the toddler, I think, are great ways to go about it.
When you were talking about traditionism, it reminds me of like mothers and fathers that they what is that process called? An implanted.
In vitro fertilization.
Yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think that also makes the case that because I know of a YouTube mom that she actually adopted one of those and she had the baby. It wasn't her husband's, it wasn't hers. But I feel like that kind of shows that it's a person. Yeah, it's even if it didn't rely on like the mother to to bring forth that life, it was still a person, and
right.
it kind of goes with what you believe about the soul.
Yeah, great point. Absolutely. Yeah, she was a surrogate mother, but yeah, there's something there that, and no matter whose womb it's in, it's still a person. Absolutely.
So what do you think about all of those, I guess, potential, or would you say that there are like souls already, people?
So you're talking about fertilized eggs that may be frozen, things like that. Is that right? Yeah. So these are persons ultimately. There's a great book. I'm trying to see if I see it. There's a great book called Body and Soul by J.P. Moreland. Let me look for it really quick. I think I know where it's at. Hold on. Yeah. Body and Soul by J.P. Moreland. It's probably my favorite book on the existence of the soul. And notice the subtitle, Human Nature and the Crisis in Ethics. It not only talks about the case for the soul, but it goes into things like DNA, personal identity, hereditary. Then it goes into ethics, and it goes into abortion and fetal research, reproductive technologies, genetic technologies, euthanasia, physician-assisted suicide, and care of persons at the end of life. So it goes into a lot of ethical issues and how these issues relate to the soul. And so to what you're saying, given the Traducian view, and given that it is a soul that forms a body and whatnot, then ultimately, yes, we would say that you have human persons that are here. Now, they would their abilities such as consciousness would be latent, not actualized. This is not the exact same, but you can think of it as, just rough and ready, as, let's say non-conscious persons. But if you were to disregard or eliminate or terminate these, you're killing human beings, essentially. Now, just because they don't look like us, let's do the SLED test. They don't look like us. Well, they're different in size, right? Well, they're in a petri dish. Well, their environment's different. They're still human persons. Well, they're only this. They don't have consciousness or arms or legs level of development. Well, they still depend on a womb in order to fully develop. That's degree of dependency. But if none of those things matter, well, then why aren't they? Then none of those are objections to whether or not these are human persons.
What about ability to feel pain? That's a big one.
Yeah, I would say, so great question. I would say that could fall under maybe a few of them, but that would probably be maybe level of development, because that's, again, function. That's functionality. Now, in that talk, maybe I can send you the link, and if you want, you can put the link in the description of this video that I've talked about, where it's about 5 to 7 minutes where I talk about the SLED test. There's a young girl named Gabby Gringus. There's a few others. I think there's only 12 people in the entire world that have a condition known as the congenital insensitivity towards pain, I think it's what it's called. And basically, these are people who from birth cannot feel pain at all. Now, here's what's interesting. First of all, this may sound like, oh, that's awesome. It's actually it's a really hard condition to deal with, especially because I don't think they've ever detected it from birth, which means the way that they found out these people had this condition was sometime after the child was born and weird things started to happen. Here's an example. This little girl, Gabby Gringus, um, one of the first things they had to do was, I think, pull out all her teeth as a toddler, because when she began teething, she would chew on her lips and tongue. She can't feel pain, so she would basically mutilate her mouth and was just bleeding like crazy, but wasn't crying, wasn't grimacing, and the parents were kind of confused. Sometime later, they had to sew her eyes shut because one time she had an itch in her eye, and again, she can't feel pain, so she nearly clawed her eyes out and nearly made herself blind. After a while, things like this started to happen, and the parents had to keep a close eye on her. They put swimming goggles on her eyes, and they put mittens on her hands. And again, they had to pull her teeth out so she wouldn't hurt herself because she could not feel pain. But there was times where she'd put her hands on a hot stove trying to stand up, and then she'd look at her hand and it's completely burnt. She could not feel pain. Now, I can go deeper into the story. You can look it up, Gabby Gringus. But now consider this. If not feeling pain is a condition that justifies abortion, we should be able to kill Gabby Gringus as soon as she goes to sleep, because she wouldn't be conscious and she wouldn't feel pain. But obviously, everybody would say, no, that's immoral. Right. Why? Because these functions don't make you human, meaning you can lack these and still be human. I debated an abortion lawyer on the topic of abortion at a secular college campus. I don't know if you've seen that one. That one's also on my YouTube channel. And then there's like a 9-minute highlight video of that. That was one of my favorite, because I really was able to unpack a lot of these with someone who's a lawyer who, or you wouldn't be able to tell from the debate, but, a lawyer on abortion who was the executive director of Narrow Pro-Choice in Texas. So that was a really interesting one. I'd highly recommend people watch.
This is another big one. What if the mother's life is in jeopardy?
Very good. Yeah. So a few things to say here. Remember earlier I talked about competing moral values. That's one thing to consider, which I won't go too deep into there. And that may even go into some what's called virtue ethics. But setting that aside for right now, here's what I can say briefly is the intent of an action is what aids us in how we should label an action. And here's why I say that. In these instances where the mother's life is at risk, I wouldn't necessarily call these abortions, even if the procedure is similar or even the same. And here's why. Suppose I were to stab a baby with a metal object. People might say that's immoral. But if I told you it was a syringe with medicine that was going to save the child's life, people would say I was a hero. So you take the same action, but give it a different intent, and now we can label it as something different. Or let's say the difference between a suicide and a sacrifice. Again, some people may want to call these the same thing, but I don't think they are. If I were to strap bombs on my chest and push a button, let's say I was a jihadist, that is a suicide bombing. But if I'm a soldier in Iraq and I jump on top of grenades to save my fellow soldiers and comrades, I am now making a sacrifice to save them. Same action or similar action, but different intent. When it comes to abortion, I'd say abortion is you're killing an unborn child as an end in itself for some that would be non-justifiable, because let's be honest, there aren't instances where taking innocent life can be justified, but they're very rare. And this goes into, again, weighing the moral values. Which one of these has more weight? For example, if my house were burning down and say my 3-year-old son was in the house, or 4 now, just turned 4 a week or 2 ago, and my dog Bella was in the house, I think everyone would agree I should save my 4-month-old son. Now, does that mean my dog Bella has no value? No. Does that mean my dog Bella is not conscious? No. It just means that between the two, one of them has more value. And of course, you're factoring into chances of survival, et cetera, et cetera. Now, going back to the question you asked. When this happens, the intent is not to kill the baby. The intent is to save the mother. In other words, in an abortion, I remove the baby, and I don't care whether or not it lives, because that was the purpose, was to remove the baby. With In the other instance, I remove the baby, not to kill the baby, but to save the mother. And I'm going to do everything I can to save the baby's life if I can. And again, that's a reflection of our technology, not a reflection of the value of the baby. Typically in these instances, they're instances of what's topic pregnancy, where the baby doesn't attaches not to the womb, but to I forget, somewhere else where it shouldn't be, where if the baby continues to develop, it'll kill the mother. So a few things. One, if it's going to kill the mother, then both the baby and the mother will die if no intervention is given. Another thing to consider is often, most of the time when these are detected, the baby's already dead, and it's just a matter of removing a corpse, basically, to put it bluntly. So these aren't, I would not call these abortions for some of those reasons just mentioned. And again, I'm going to end by reiterating, the purpose is to save the mother's life, not to kill the baby. If you could take the baby out and still save the baby, or even put it back in the right place, I would say that's what should be done. But I wouldn't call these abortions if the baby dies as a indirect byproduct of saving the mother's life.
Yeah, it doesn't remove the personhood of the little failed pregnancy, I guess.
You can even go to a counterexample. I mean, not a counterexample, another example. Maybe you can call it a counterexample. Where what if, let's say it was a zombie apocalypse or something, and there was your 2-month-old child and your wife or your husband hanging over a bridge, and you were holding on to both of them, and you can only save one. Now, whichever one you pick, and let's say again, it's a zombie apocalypse, whichever one you pick, it doesn't mean the other one wasn't as valuable. It doesn't mean the other one wasn't a person. Again, showing these moral dilemmas when it comes to abortion is, first of all, it's not the same thing as abortion, because there is no moral dilemma. It's not like, all right, woman, mother so-and-so, you can either save your baby or save your husband, which no, there's no moral dilemma. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because let's say, and again, it's a horrible situation, but that's the point of these thought experiments. Let's say I save my mother. Save my wife, or, wife or mother, whatever. You probably wouldn't want to do that one because you can get into trouble with those thought experiments. But say I save my wife and not my 2-month-old baby, because perhaps I don't want my 2-month-old baby to have to go through this. And I'd rather know how my 2-month-old baby dies as opposed to getting eaten by zombies, which means it's actually a merciful act on my child. And I'm saving my wife instead of my child, because my wife has a greater chance of survival in the zombie apocalypse. I don't have to, feed her like I would a baby, etc. In other words, I could have reasons, but it's not to say that I don't love my 2-month-old baby. Whatever the case is, again, it's a matter of what are the odds, what's going on here, and what is my purpose. Now, if I could say both, I'm going to. And again, I relate that back to the abortion and the mother's life at risk. If I can, I'm going to save both. So if I can remove the baby to save the mother and still save the baby, I'm going to do that.
Yeah, and it's kind of sad listening to your pretend example. It should be, right? There should be this sadness about those situations, right?
Right. Yeah. They're sticky situations for a reason. But now take the sadness, and also I'm kind of messed up in the head when it comes to these things, and I like zombie movies, but take the sadness of this situation, right? Saving my 2-month-old baby or my wife, but compare that with a woman going into an abortion clinic who wants to kill her baby because, she doesn't want to be inconvenienced, during college. It's a huge difference, And, even people who try to use some of the examples I gave to support abortion, it's not the same. There is no, you either go to school or kill your baby. No, I know plenty of women who've done both, so yeah.
Yeah, I had been wanting to have you on this channel, but because I have heard you talk about, like, for example, the soul, morality, this topic of abortion kind of brought all of those things that I had been wanting to talk to you about. So finally, this video, I feel like this topic is perfect to talk about all those things. And so how about those miscarriages, those aborted babies? Is there biblical support for those babies those souls going to heaven?
I think there are some, and by the way, thank you again for inviting me. One of the reasons I love the topic of the soul is because how much relevance it has to not just who we are in our nature, but ethical issues such as, again, abortion, euthanasia, even anything as cloning. Again, can't recommend this book enough. It really goes into a lot of those things. And Moreland is just the man. He's my favorite. Um, so I think there is some. Of course, we can't make an entire doctrine out of one verse, but when we look holistically, systematically at God's nature and how he's dealt with other things, one of the verses that is often alluded to is where you read where David talks about his child that died and says, well, where he's at, I can't go to him, but I will be able to go to him later. In fact, I forget the exact quote, but the implication is the baby's in a place still existing where David's not. It's going to bother me if I don't look it up. This is in 2 Samuel 12:23. But now that he is dead, why should I go on fasting? Can I bring him back again? I will go to him, but he will not return to me. That's one translation. On top of that, I think I'm sure there's a handful of other verses, but moving on from there, aside from the verse aspect, if being a person, if you are your personhood, who you are, if it is grounded in your soul, if you are a soul, and if from the moment of conception you exist as a soul, then when you die, you're going to continue to exist. If there is an age of viability, that's one argument I could give, and I would give, that the child would go to heaven. But basically, we're saying, okay, now where does the soul go? And then you go into even just the question of soteriology and salvation. Do people go to hell out of ignorance? I would argue no. People don't go to hell for being ignorant. People go to hell for rejecting the revelation God has given them. Without going too deep into it, because there is a lot to say there, when this soul stands before God and God is able to communicate, I think it's God's prerogative to judge this child based on the revelation the child had. And you can correlate this with, because you don't even have to go that far as, an aborted child. You could even think of things like kids who are mentally handicapped, or what's called a vegetative state, where they have to be constantly. And I know of families who have children like this, where they can't move an inch, or even less. Some cannot move at all. They can only move their eyes from birth. I have a good friend of mine who I grew up with. I think her daughter was only expected to live a few months, then a few years. Well, her daughter, I think, is like 12 to 15 years old now. And I forget the condition she has, but has to be watched 24/7. And this young lady loves her daughter like in all her other children. But I say all this because she's still conscious. There's still a person. There's still so much life there. So even if you go to, but even if you go further than that and say, someone, again, maybe who has a mental disability in a wheelchair, God has every right to judge him how he sees fit. And if he's going to judge them based on what they know, well, then that kind of goes back into the argument for the age accountability. So I think there is biblical evidence that, yes, these unborn children will be in heaven. And I think that on top of that, God being omniscient and all loving and just, I think would, absolutely be able to accept these aborted children, unfortunately, and take them in. One of the things that does this can also be helpful when you look at some of those sticky issues, like with the Canaanites, whether these commands were literal or figurative. I think it's God's prerogative, first of all, again, to do this. But if a child who is taken at birth gets a free pass, if you will, of course, I'm speaking figuratively, so to speak, then I would it gives me comfort knowing that even these aborted children, though I would hate to see that happen, will be in heaven, and don't have to go through the suffering of this life. Gosh, there's times I wish I weren't alive. If you read the book of Job, he says himself, "Curse the day that I was born. I wish I hadn't been born. I wish I was born still. I wish I was a stillborn." I hate the fact that I'm alive. So you even see Job regretting his own life, wishing, basically saying, gosh, stillborn children are lucky. They don't have to go through the pain I'm going through. So now I'm not advocating for that, but you can see how someone in this kind of anguish can see that almost as God's grace being applied to something so horrendous as abortion. And hence God can take the evil in this world and turn around and use it for good.
So the morality part, according to the Christian worldview, is abortion moral?
It's definitely immoral. You're taking a human life, an innocent human life. And in fact, so going back to what I was saying earlier, I did say there are times, very rarely, where it's justified. But again, you're weighing moral values. Remember, my son versus my dog. Take an example. So during 9/11, which was about a week ago, the 20th anniversary, during that time, when they knew that one of the planes was going, I don't know if it was towards the Pentagon or towards one of the towers, the government gave the green light okay to send fighter jets to shoot down one of the planes. Now, note that it didn't mean, okay, guys, for the next 10 minutes, it's okay to shoot down planes. But the point was, if we shot down the plane that was filled with innocent human beings, we would save so many more human beings in catastrophes and deaths and injuries. So it was a sticky situation, but you look at the outcomes and you look at what has the greater moral value. It didn't mean the people on the planes weren't innocent. It didn't mean the people on the planes should have died. It didn't mean that the people on the planes, didn't have as much value as the people on the floor. It meant, given the situation, unfortunately, how can we save the greater number of people? Now, there may be those listening thinking, oh, okay, what about the thought experiment, which I refer you back to my debate where I kind of responded, where people say, okay, what if there was a burning building and there was 100 fertilized eggs, basically human persons, and one baby in the other room crying, which one would you save? Quite frankly, one, I could say, I don't know. But again, when you go to the abortion clinic, they don't say, okay, ma'am, do you want us to kill your children or a million of those children over there? Like, there's no more dilemma. But I would say, one, I'm not sure, but that has nothing to do with whether or not these two are valuable. Are they persons? Are they intrinsically, made in God's image? Yes. In other words, my decision doesn't change that. But still, here's how I did answer during the debate. I said, well, honestly, it would depend. Are the 100 fertilized eggs my children, or is the unborn child? Or is a 2-month-old child my child? Because I would say at the end of the day, I'm going to save my children. I think I have more obligation to save my children. So if the one on the left side, if those are my children, I'm going for that one. If the 2-month-old baby is my child, I'm going for that one. Also, to kind of push the point further, to show how it's really a non-dilemma in the sense of has anything to do with abortion, let's replace 100 fertilized eggs with 100 old people who are 98 years old and will probably die in, let's say, a year or two. And I know that sounds morbid. My grandfather, by the way, just turned 100 years old a few months ago. I hope he lives many more years. But, just for the sake of the analogy, let's say you have 100 old people at 100 years old and a 2-month-old baby. Which one do you save? Again, regardless of your answer, they're still both human. They're still both intrinsically valuable. So at this point, we're not even talking about anything relevant to abortion. We're just kind of talking about preference or who we think has a greater survival value, but it has nothing to do with the question of the unborn. It really boils down to the question, are the unborn human persons? And if they're not, back to what Coco said, if they are not human persons, then you don't need to argue about it. Just do it. But if they are human persons, no justification it could ever merit killing them.
I think I've heard someone say that if it is such a good thing for babies to never be born in this terrible world, then shouldn't Christians advocate for abortion?
Yeah. So I guess the assumption right there would be, is it the Christian position or doctrine that it's not a good thing to be born? I don't think so. I think it's a great. I think life is wonderful. Now, do I think life comes with trials and tribulations and heartaches and heartbreaks? Absolutely. But do I think that makes life worth living? No. If anything, to be 100% transparent to you, the times when I'm like, gosh, I hope God comes back today, or if I got hit by an 18 wheeler, I wouldn't mind. It's not because I thought life was so horrible. It was more for convenience. I can't remember how many times I prayed for God to come back when I was in high school the day before a test I had to take that I didn't study for. Why? Not because life was so horrible, because I was lazy and didn't want to study for my test. And I'm like, Lord, if you just came back tonight or tomorrow before 10 o'clock, right before second period, I would be so appreciative. So I wouldn't have to take that. In other words, it wasn't because I hated life. It was because it was convenient. Now, is that a justification, that we should be in favor of children, being killed? No, because for a few things. One, what if one of those children that were aborted would have been someone that would have grown up and given us a cure to cancer? What if one of those aborted children would have been the one to grow up and, solve the whole world's problems of X, Y, and Z? I don't know. On top of that, it's a good thing to give life. If God created us, then apparently he thinks life's a good thing. And I would agree with him. And I think there's many great things to be had here on earth. So suffice it to say, first of all, it's not the Christian position, that life's so horrible. But by the same token, it is a Christian position that if a baby is taken prematurely, then we have a hope and comfort that the non-believer, non-Christian perspective has, namely that, well, they are, quote, in a better place. And it's not just a Christian cliche. If Christianity is true, what better place could they be in, than what better place in God's presence? Yeah.
Yeah. Do you think that other worldviews are in a position to best give like a moral argument?
No. Maybe some other potential theistic worldviews, but that's another discussion. But any non-God naturalistic worldview, no, because I would argue that if there is no God, there can be no objective morality. And if there is no God, killing a human being wouldn't be any different, objectively speaking, than killing a cockroach. Now, someone might say, oh, but a cockroach isn't rational like us. So what does rationality have to do with whether or not we can kill something? And why rationality? I mean, we could say, well, it's not fair because cockroaches have exoskeletons and we don't, so the cockroach is more valuable. Or we could say, well, I only have 2 arms or 2 legs, but a cockroach has, like, I don't know, however many, let's just say, 6 or 7, whatever. I don't know, don't care. But the point is, well, why are you looking at one thing that benefits us? What if we pointed to something else? Well, the cockroach may win. So yeah, I don't think any rational, objective moral argument can be given. One, because you're going to have to assume some kind of intrinsic value, and that would only come, I'd say, from being made in God's image. And you would have to assume an objective moral standard, which I would say could not exist if there was no God. On top of a few other things that wouldn't have time to get into, but I'll just say one is like teleology, that we exist for a purpose, a reason, an end goal, a final cause. If there's no God, we're not evolving for the sake of a purpose or goal. We're not trying to reach something in our evolution. We're just changing and mutating. And there is no goal that we're trying to reach. So what does it matter if a baby's born with one head or two? If a baby's born with a good heart or a bad heart? Given evolution, there's no purpose or objective value to any of those things. Some things happen and some things don't. So there can be no objective objection or complaint given there, because there is no what's called teleology. If there's no God, things just happen. Rocks fall and kill hitchhikers, and mutations happen and kill children. And at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter.
And the last topic for today are laws based on morality grounded in the Christian worldview. And should Christians enforce or vote for like pro-life laws? And I guess I'm talking specifically about American laws.
Yeah. So I don't know if I'd say that all laws against abortion would necessarily be grounded in a Christian worldview, but I would say that all laws in favor of life and against abortion can only be valid if the Christian worldview is true. Note the difference. In other words, someone may say, I'm going to ban abortions because I run a Toys R Us company or a diaper company, and the more children there are, the more money I get. Well, that wouldn't be grounded in a Christian worldview, but the principle of protecting unborn life could only make sense in a Christian worldview perspective. Um, the second question you asked, absolutely. I think Christians should be voting in favor of Christian values. Now, to any non-believers or secular minded people listening, before you throw your tomatoes at me, if you will, first, is because I can already hear people being dumb and shouting separation of church and state. Most people who shout that don't know where that came from. It wasn't it wasn't because we were supposed to, quote, keep the church out of the government. The quote came from a letter. I forget, I think it was from Jefferson, but it was basically saying, hey, tell the state not to tell us as a church what to do. Thanks. Which is how it's used the opposite today and thought of. But first and foremost, I would say if there's no God, there's no objective morality. So any morals, I would argue, can only be valid if Christianity is true. And this isn't, quote, me voting my religious morality, so to speak. I mean, you can look at it that way, but I'm looking at it from an ontological, teleological, objective perspective. And who cares if it is someone's moral point of view? The question is it true or false? So, for example, someone may say, we should make murder illegal. Well, guess what? The Bible says thou shalt not murder. Well, is that a religious perspective? And should we now make murder legal just because the Bible says it? In other words, are we trying to just do the opposite of what the Bible says? Because if so, well, then we should make murder illegal. But if everybody thinks, yeah, no, it's a good thing murder is illegal, well, then who cares whether or not it's a religious perspective or not? The question is it good or bad? Is it true or false? That's all really we should be asking from a political standpoint. So it has nothing to do with what my religious perspective is. Is it true or false? So yeah, but yes, Christians should definitely vote in favor of what Scripture teaches us, in favor of our ethical, moral perspectives. Because again, at the end of the day, if Christianity is true, then we should follow what's true, and we should lead and live our lives by those rules and principles.
A lot of the arguments are that it's a woman's legal right. It's a woman's choice, that we're going backwards. We're taking away a woman's right to choose if she wants what she wants to do with her body. And I was just kind of thinking that in our country we have the freedom to think, right? We have the freedom to have our own opinions, even if some of those opinions are wrong. When it comes to the freedom to do something, right? And so you're arguing that because abortion is killing a person, then we shouldn't give women the freedom to do that.
Well, a few things to be said here. The first thing, so I think a big problem with the discussion surrounding abortion, whether it be from a pro-choice or pro-life perspective, is the rhetoric that's being used and the language that's being used and how things aren't defined. So, for example, people saying, are you pro-choice? Depending on how I'm feeling that day, I may say, oh, absolutely. I am pro-choice. I am for a woman's ability to choose whatever she wants to choose, as long as she's not murdering her children. I'm pro-choice for a woman to choose what car she wants to drive. I am pro-choice for a woman to choose what job she wants to have. I'm pro-choice even when I ask my wife where she wants to eat. It's up to you. Choose where you want, even though she often says, I don't know. And when I say, well, let's go here, she goes, no, I don't want that. I'm like, well, why did you tell me? Anyways, that's another choice, a whole different discussion. But I am pro-choice for a lot of things for women. I am just not pro-choice for women killing their children. And also, no, it is not a woman's right to do with her body whatever she wants. Believe it or not, a woman cannot do whatever she wants with her body. How do I know that? Because a lot of the times the same thing applies to men. For example, I don't have the freedom to intoxicate my body with alcohol and get behind the wheel of a car. Because if I were drunk and I was driving, and a cop pulls me over, I can't say, officer, excuse me, misogynist, my body, my choice. Thank you very much. I chose to intoxicate my body and drive. No, he's going to slap the cuffs on me. So no, women cannot do whatever they want with their body, no matter who you are. You cannot get high on marijuana in America, especially without a prescription. Why? You can't say, well, officer, my body, my choice. No, you can't. You cannot strap a vest of bombs onto your chest and blow yourself up with your body in public, even though it's your body. It is not your choice. So it's just a stupid slogan. That doesn't do anything. No, we're not moving backwards, because it should never be a good thing for children to be women to be allowed to kill their children. And there's a lot more I go into, but again, you can even look at it this way. Suppose a woman was poor, and the only way she could feed her child was to breastfeed the child. And let's say the woman says, you know what, my body, my choice. I'm going to leave my 1-month-old baby there and let it starve to death. Will this woman be arrested? Absolutely. Why? Because of negligence and not taking care of her children. Could she go to court and say, officer, I was breastfeeding, my body, my choice? No, won't work. Stupid. Right. So no, I don't believe it's this woman's choice. I don't believe it has anything to do with well, there's more to go into. The whole my body, my choice slogan is just ridiculous and doesn't apply on so many levels.
The last thing, do you think that there's a difference between being active politically and vocal about, how abortion is wrong versus Christian nationalism?
Yeah, it depends what you mean precisely by Christian nationalism, but I'll say this. Um, Abortion is not a political issue. As Braxton Hunter, who you know and I'm good friends with, as my friend Braxton Hunter says, abortion is not a political issue. It's a moral issue that has been politicized.
Mm.
I mean, it's kind of the same. I don't mean to demonetize this video, but it's kind of the same thing with some of the mandates going on. At some point, it's like, okay, this isn't even about science anymore. It's more about politics and power, right? Um, I would say the same. Well, to be honest with you, your video is not probably going to be monetized because of the topic. Any abortion video I've done on my channel has never been monetized because YouTube always, anyways, setting that aside. Thank you, YouTube. Yeah, it's not a political issue. It's a moral issue. And this is why when it comes to these kind of questions and people say, oh, you're just trying to bring religion into politics, I say, no, you're trying to bring, politics into morality. These are metaphysical questions. These are philosophical questions. These are theistic related questions. And I have something to say. Now, if it came to something else that I really didn't care about when it came to politics, I probably wouldn't vote. In other words, if it wasn't a moral issue, I may not have too much to say, and I may not care too much to say. I'm not saying other Christians shouldn't. I'm just saying from my personal perspective. Now, I do think we should have Christians in politics and involved in politics as much as possible and to their ability. I think, in other words, to do away with this old cliche and way of thought, just because someone is not called to be a pastor or evangelist or minister does not mean they're not called to godly vocation or ministry. We need, I mean, look at Christian movies. They're horrible, which means people a long time ago did not answer the call to be Christian movie makers because they thought in order to be in a Christian ministry, you had to be a pastor and evangelist. That's not the case. We need Christians in every area. And those two are Christian ministries and vocations. And I think politics is definitely one of them. So the Christian nationalism aspect, yeah, it depends what you mean by that. I have an idea of what you probably mean by that. But at the end of the day, given our governmental system, I say we vote in line with what is morally right, vote against what is morally wrong. And we should obviously try to lead and set an example based on what we know to be true and reject what is false, whether that be questions regarding same-sex marriage, whether it be abortion, no matter what the case is. I'll put it this way, whatever God tells us, if he is omniscient, knows everything, and all loving, loves everyone unconditionally, then we should probably listen to what he has to say and find out why he's saying these things, because I'm pretty sure he's smarter than us. And if he's smarter than us, well, guess what? I'm going to lean on what he has to say, and I'm going to unpack and look into these things and be able to articulate that, when challenged in public.
Okay. Well, this has been a really great conversation, Eric. Thank you so much for giving me this much of your time.
Absolutely.
And if anyone wants to learn more about you, where can they go?
You can just check out my YouTube channel. There's a lot of stuff I say on there. I have a website, but I don't really keep up with that. But I do have some other stuff on there. But yeah, I'd say the best place, you can type in Eric Hernandez on YouTube and check out some of my stuff.
Okay, well, thank you so much again. And I hope you have a blessed day.
Thank you.
Alrighty, bye.
All right.
Joy, joy.